Okay, so Jennison had mentioned somebody from upstate New York. That's me. I'm from Buffalo. About as far away from Toronto as Brooklyn is from the airport. if that helps, if that gives any context. Do I just tap to make it go?
Yeah.
Not used to. Okay, so I put the hashtag on the beginning, the A11YNC. So I have a couple slides dedicated to my ego that says who I am. Look at me, I've written some stuff. Woo! I'm on the HTML Working Group with the W3C and the Accessibility Task Force. I like to think I'm dumbing it down for everybody, mostly for me. Have a company in Buffalo. You can avoid me on Twitter at Adrian, A-A-R-D-R-I-A-N. Yeah, see, you've probably actually followed me. You know it's a terrible idea. So diving right in, A11Y, a lot of people who are relatively new to accessibility don't recognize that it's two ones and not two L's. A11Y is a numeronym. It's the first letter A, the last letter Y from accessibility, and you replace all those annoying letters in the middle with the number 11, because that's the number of letters you've just replaced. So localization is the L10N, internationalization is the I18N. So if you stumble across these on Twitter in particular, you'll probably start to think that those stand for something instead of just very strange words. So I have a photo from my office that shows some repainting that we were having done, and we painted the ceiling cyberspace. It's gray. One of the columns is green, it's lined Ricky, and the blue column is called online. Terrible colors. Sherwin-Williams came up with these names. So you got these nice names that are all high tech, etc. But then there's this one color swatch called accessible beige. It's the color of putty colored computers from the 80s. I mean, this really says it all. And my partners wanted to paint my office this color because they don't like me. Hi guys, are we streaming and they're watching? We're gonna have a long talk on Monday. Okay, so I have half an hour to cover all these things. So statistics, how to be selfish, some techniques, basic tests. The technical bits I'll probably move through very quickly because I understand there's a talk coming up later on where we'll go into more detail. So statistics, I'm going to mostly breeze through these as well. All of my slides will be available online later if you want to copy, paste, or correct these stats. Overall in the US, in the 21 to 64-year-old age group, more than 10% of the population has a disability. When you're looking at the 65 to 74-year-old age group, 25%, 75 and up, 50%. And I'm counting visual, hearing, mobility, cognitive impairments. So vision impairments, I have a slide here that just shows the number continues to climb as you age, and we'll reference to that a little bit later on. Hearing impairments also continues to climb as you age. I note in here that worldwide there are 360 million people who have disabling hearing loss, which isn't just me in a club asking what it is you're saying to me. And where are we going next? Mobility impairments continue to climb. Once you start out at 5.5% in the 21 to 64 age bracket. When you get up to 75 and up, you're looking at a full third of the population. Cognitive impairments are a little bit tougher for people to nail down. And there's a lot of really interesting discussion around this, and I will not pretend to be an expert on it at all. But I know it includes things like dyslexia, dyscalculia, which is essentially the numbers version of dyslexia, distractions, ADD, ADHD, etc. In the US, we're looking at, in the 21 to 64 age bracket, 4%, just about 4%. And once you get up to 75 and up, you're looking at 14+%. So that's not an insignificant number. And a lot of these disabilities, if somebody has one, they usually have more than one. You're typically not just one thing you're dealing with. So I want to talk about how to be selfish. Now that you have some of these general numbers, which may or may not help you make a case when you're at work, let's instead take a look at WebAIM's hierarchy of motivating accessibility change. They have this lovely pyramid, and you start out on the bottom. Easiest thing to do is guilt people, and then work to punish them, and then make it a requirement. Work your way up to rewarding them, enlighten them, and then ultimately you want to inspire them. And I know from experience this is very difficult to do. So I've modified it. I take that tree and I put a star on top, make it about me. It's much easier to understand how accessibility can help other people if you think about how is it going to help me. So one of the things I mentioned early in my slides is something about getting older. The awkward thing about getting older is unless you're very fortunate, some might say, it affects nearly everybody. There's a joke there. Okay. Not for the young, obviously. It does carry risks and side effects. In this photo, there's a couple sitting on the curb, and the only difference between the couple on the left and the couple on the right, besides about 5 feet of distance, is probably 40 years in age. But they're the same people, separated just by time. They're doing the same thing. They're arguing about where they're going next. In this photo, there are 2 women sitting on a park bench, and they're both reading. And again, other than about 2 feet, the only thing separating them is age, probably about 40 or 50 years. And the fact that one is reading a book, and the other one's reading an iPhone, and one of those is solar powered. Thank you, first time I tried that joke. So now forget the aging part. Think about accidents, because this isn't something you have to wait for. Accidents happen all the time. That's great news, isn't it? So, broken limbs, eye injuries, hearing injuries, good old-fashioned head trauma. If you live in my house, the last one is pretty common. Every time I walk into a low-hanging shelf, that's my fault. So it's not uncommon to have a broken arm, a broken hand, broken wrist, which impairs your ability to use a mouse, and now you become a keyboard user. Eye injuries happen in a number of ways. I have a photo here showing somebody wearing what do you call it? An eye patch, but it's a medical eye patch, not a cool pirate one. Not a cool eye patch like this guy. It's a metal eye patch that goes, I think, nicely with the mohawk and his eye makeup, but that impairs his ability to see. I refer to this as a cognitive impairment. This is a bunch of guys in England who are chasing a wheel of cheese down a hill. So they might start off perfectly lovely, bright young men, but by the time they get to the end of the bottom of that hill, assuming they even got the cheese, they're probably going to have one or more disabilities. I'm just saying. Now, if like me, you believe that you are invincible and allergic to nothing, so if you're invincible, there are other things that are factors. Simple things, multitasking, which nobody does. Sunlight, which is always trying to kill me. Eating lunch at your desk, which is an everyday thing. Not having headphones handy, and then recognizing that the content you're looking at probably isn't even in your native language. So if, like me, and I have some photos to illustrate these, if like me, you're this guy working at his keyboard while eating a taco, you have your choice between getting tomatoes in your keyboard or going one-handed on your computer, and you can see he's using his keyboard only, no mouse. Boy, keyboard accessibility becomes really important there. Working in the sun. I had to have a slide with a cat. I don't think I can be taken seriously if there isn't a cat. So this laptop balanced on a bush with the sun on it, does anybody really think you can see what's on this screen unless you turn the brightness up all the way? And then imagine a low contrast website or application on top of that. These 2 guys are my favorite. They put down a tarp in a park. They got their laptops on a little folding table. They're both on their phones. One of them is smoking. Technically, they're not even using their computers. I think they're just props. they're trying to find a way to expense this smoking lunch. I'm not sure. But I'm taking it a step further with this picture. This is a guy sitting on a bench who's clipped sheets of paper to his hat and to himself to block the sun while he's reading the paper. But the best part, on his lap, that's not a laptop. That's a typewriter. No. It really doesn't further my argument. I just like the image. This is an image of a guy sitting in a cafe, and you can see he's got a video camera on the table next to him, and he is probably doing video editing, and that probably accounts for why his headphones are in. This is a case where he's working in public, and he needs to hear what he is doing, and so he is temporarily hearing impaired. In this scenario, gentleman and his significant other, in this case a very large dog, laying in bed. I know I don't want to wake up anybody who's in bed with me by working, so headphones can come in handy there as well. But that's just me. This image of the motorcycle between 2 apartment buildings is analogous to my living situation, except I don't live in an apartment building. On either side of my house, I have people who own motorcycles, and they love to rev them. So because of this, whenever I watch the television, I have closed captions on. They're just always on. Because I can't hear, I never know when they're gonna go have a motorcycle battle via my yard or living room. This is a young woman who is in a situation I've been in more than once. You're in a foreign country, you're looking at a computer that's not in your native language. The keyboard doesn't make sense because there are letters on it you've never seen. Are these emoji? What am I typing? So put all that aside and now think about the tech support issues. If, like me, when you go to visit your family, they ask you to fix the printer and make the screen do something, I don't know. That's a lot of lost time. So if you can do whatever possible to help them with software and configuration that caters to what they're trying to do, make it easy to see, make it easy to use, make sure you don't spend Thanksgiving in their office fiddling with the computer because you don't want to be the guy who has to take the phone call. Here, Mom and Dad, here's what Ghostery does. Don't worry about the big purple box in the corner. It's not the death of everything. So the general message I'm trying to get across here, and I have a lot more slides to go, so don't think you're off the hook yet. The general message I'm trying to get through here is that supporting accessibility is ultimately something that helps serve future you. It also helps the injured or the encumbered you. So being selfish about this stuff means you're helping yourself when you're older, when you're injured, when you're encumbered, working in the sun with your dog, whatever. But all of this is important because if you can get younger developers to buy into this, it's helping the future you. Because like, maybe some of you are like me, you don't want to be coding for the rest of your life. There are libraries that are coming out there doing things that I think I do well. They're terrible, of course, because ego is my friend. But in this scenario, you're probably going to advance in your career, and all these skills you need to be teaching to the next generation of developers coming up behind you, because they are the ones who are going to be supporting you later on. So it's important that you sort of take this in and then pay it forward. Can I use that? Is that a copyright infringement? I don't know. So some quick techniques. Accessibility is not a checklist. I think this is important. A lot of people lose sight of that. In this image, I have a picture that's been circulated around the web a lot, which shows a ramp integrated into a staircase. And a lot of people say, wow, this is great. Design, accessibility, etc. can be attractive and it can look great. The only problem is this is a death trap for anybody on a wheelchair. Each turn ends in a stone wall. The slope is too great, so you'll lose control of the wheelchair, which means you end in a stone wall. But even if you don't use a wheelchair, because of where they've cut the ramps into the stairs, it's step, 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 trip, trip, step, 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 trip, trip, step, step. It's a very confounding staircase. So somebody satisfied a checklist, and they did a great job satisfying a checklist, but they probably never actually had anybody use it. It's important that not only is it a checklist, you have to recognize that it's an ongoing process. And I think this is relevant because Nicholas Steenhout, who recently did a Kickstarter thing for a GoPro to mount on his wheelchair, he rolls around his hometown and he shows all the things he encounters every day. And this is a great image. It shows the ramp to a drugstore in the middle of winter. Not only did they not clear it of snow, but they put plants on the ramp. Okay, we got the ramp. We satisfied that checklist item. Ka-chink, done. Well, winter comes and we're not clearing the ramp. Well, what are you talking about? We're accessible. We have a ramp that nobody can use, of course. So you have to recognize just because you do it the one time doesn't mean it's good. Things change. New developers come in. Techniques change. Software changes. So it's something you have to stay ahead of all the time. I'm going to touch briefly on user stories here. This is a technique. If you're familiar with user stories, it's about identifying the user, the outcome, and the value to that outcome. So as a user, I want a certain outcome, or I want that outcome so I can get this value. And I created some selfish user stories. One of them is, as a user on a sunlit patio, I want to be able to read the content and see the controls. It's pretty straightforward. That's a very simple user story. This doesn't, anybody who does user stories for a living, you might recognize I'm playing a little loose with this. But it's a concept, and you'd have to bill me if I did a really good one. As a user in bed with a sleeping spouse, I want to watch a training video in silence so that I can get caught up at work. I've identified the user, what my goal is, and what the value is. In order to click links as a user with no elbow room in coach class with a tiny trackpad, I want click areas to be large enough and adequately spaced. And as somebody who flew JetBlue to get here, yes. There is not even elbow room. There was nowhere to put my elbows. The guy next to me actually put stuff on the, anyway, crazy. As a user distracted by the TV, I want clear headings and labels so that I don't lose my place. Pretty straightforward, simple user stories. You can build on these selfish user stories so that you're surreptitiously sneaking accessibility support into the user stories. That way you're not taking the fun away from the developers who get to say, no disabled people use this site. There is a great example of personas from the book A Web for Everyone. Sarah Horton, Whitney Quesenberry put this together, and I'm not going to pretend that I can speak as well as they have. So they have a book excerpt online, and I have a link to it in my slides. But I put together my own very quick persona for me, for Adrian. I work when I should be relaxing, and I relax when I should be working, because I'm a twit. I live between two motorcycles. I work late at night with the television on. I use subtitles whenever I watch Netflix, and I keep all my screens as dark as possible, because I'm trying to save battery life. I also don't want to scorch my retinas. That photo of me with the goggles is an official ID photo, not government issued. Anyway, so some basic tests. When you're surfing a web form, click on the field labels. If it puts the focus in the field, they're doing something right. If it doesn't put the focus in the field, you need to work on that. Make sure you're using the label element. So, but for those who are watching at home, and everybody in the audience, again, these slides will be online later, so I'm skipping through some of the text, but I'm trying to get the general point across. Unplug your mouse, or if you're like me, unplug somebody else's mouse, because that's even funnier. And can you use the page, the application, the site? Can you use it without a mouse? Is it clear where the focus is? Can you tell where you're going? Does the tab order make sense? In this screenshot, I show that I don't destroy the outline none, so I can navigate through the navigation. I can tab through the navigation, and you can see which one has focus. Not only do I replicate the hover styles, but I'm leaving the outline styles in place. Turn off images. This is hilarious for some designers, I've found. If you turn off images and the page doesn't make sense anymore, well, that's a big red flag. So in this screenshot, I've got a logo in the upper left. I've got some images in the navigation, and I got this big picture of a kid chasing a soccer ball. When I turn off the images, though, all the stuff goes away, and there's no alt text, and that's okay, with the exception of the logo, which still says Buffalo Soccer Club. The kid chasing the soccer ball doesn't add value to the page. I don't need to waste the user's time with a 200-word description of a happy kid chasing a soccer ball. We get it. It's a soccer site. The navigation, those images, don't add necessary meaning. They're visual flourishes. I can get rid of those. That's okay. Turn on high contrast mode. This is an underutilized test that I think everybody should try at least once. I even have the keyboard shortcut, left Alt, left Shift, and print screen. If you're using Windows, this kicks on high contrast mode, which blows away all your background images. It changes all the colors. Any colors you had for the text, those are replaced as well. If your site becomes unusable, you've got a bit of a problem there. So the same page with the kid chasing the soccer ball. With high contrast mode, you can still see everything. The images that were replaced, again, were visual flourishes. They don't matter. The logo's still there, the picture of the kid chasing the soccer ball is still there. All the text is still legible. Now, to be fair, projected on the wall is kind of hard to see this purple, but I'm reasonably confident on screen that it would be clear when you're looking at it. One of my favorites, and also sometimes the most tricky to do, is turning off the CSS. Because the CSS lends so much layout style to the page, not just visual, but also helps determine how the user is going to view the page, it's important to turn that off. You want to make sure that the important content doesn't disappear. You want to make sure error messages are still clear. The content still flows in a reasonable order, and that if you have any styles that are still in place, that's a cue that you might have a problem, which might not be accessibility related, it might just be development process related, because that means you have inline styles. So that same page, with all of the styles turned off, it just flows. It just flows. I scrolled down so you don't see the bullet list that makes up the navigation, but it works. Nothing's out of order. It's pretty much in the order that you would expect. Color blindness and contrast testing are always kind of fun. I link to some tools here. I link to 4. There are many more on the web. And again, when these slides are online, you can grab those links. But you want to make sure that those action items are still visible, and you want to make sure that the text is still visible. And of course, there are W3C guidelines for the right values on these. This is a version of the page as if you looked at it with protanopia. The same page if you're looking at it with deuteranopia, and the same page if you're looking at it with tritanopia. So it doesn't change that much. You can still identify the different navigation items and what has focus, etc. But you still need to keep that in mind. You still need to be careful with your link colors, things like that, where you're going to lose that value. When it comes to media, look for captions, look for transcripts. Do they have text alternative, any audio or video clips? Are there links to the transcripts or the closed captions? Are those easy to find and straightforward? I linked to some tools here on how you can do your own captioning and transcripts. I also linked to a video, which I think is a great example, and I always forget the name of the video, and I have to look up at the screen. The Lady Vanishes has not just audio description, but it has closed captions as well. So it's a really nice example of how that can flow in a YouTube video of all things, and still add a lot of value. And by the way, if you want to watch Lady Vanishes, the whole movie's online for free. That's kind of nice. Hyperlinks. It's amazing how underserved hyperlinks are. Make sure that you're avoiding any of those click here's, more, link to. Avoid all caps if you can, full URLs, ditch the emoticons. Are you warning users before you're opening new windows? Do the links, if they are downloads, do they provide helpful information, like this is a 300 meg PDF of our menu? Come to our restaurant. Are you using pagination links, and are those clear? Are your links underlined or otherwise obvious? Is there alt text for image links? Rather important. And is the link text consistent? So if you're linking to the same resource repeatedly throughout the site, try and call it the same thing. I don't want to download your menu 5 times because I'm expecting a different thing every time, especially not if it's 300 megabytes and I'm standing outside your restaurant. How am I doing on time?
Very good.
I don't even know what that means.
You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. I'm going to take a sip. How's everybody doing? That was fun. Thanks for letting me do that. Hi, Internet. Okay. I'm going to blow through some technical bits. This is the final section. So I might get caught up here, but I want to be cautious because I got 10 minutes and I can get lost in the weeds on any one of these. And you're probably going to hear it again later, and then it's going to get very technical and they'll be crying. So, why ARIA? And it's W-A-I, ARIA, not the Viking lumberjack. Why on earth would you use ARIA? So, Web Accessibility Initiative, Accessible Rich Internet Applications. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but briefly. Ultimately, it adds accessibility information to HTML elements. What's really cool about it is you don't have to use it with HTML5. If, like me, you can use it with HTML4. Or if you're, I still use HTML4 sometimes. If you're really cool and hipster, you could use it with XHTML. Choose your weapon. So there are 5 rules of ARIA use, and I think these are really important because before you dive into ARIA, you kind of need to keep these in mind because they're guiding principles. There were 4 when I first put this talk together, but things evolve and that's good. If you can use a native HTML5 element with semantic behavior already built in, do so. It's that simple. You want a top level heading? You want an H1? Use an H1. Don't throw a role heading on something. Second rule, do not change native semantics unless you really have to. I have the H1 with a role button on it. Don't do that. Don't. Very bad. Very bad. You're overriding the value of having an H1 on the page by trying to make it do something it's not designed to do. So don't override native semantics. This is important. If any of you saw me not rant. I started to rant and then I realized I was wrong. Don't put the role search on the form itself because you're overriding the native semantics of the form. If you're going to use a role search, put it on a container around or within the form. I was an idiot. I didn't know this until a few months ago. So that point about us not being experts? This guy. Rule number 3. All interactive ARIA controls must be usable with the keyboard. Pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's hit me a few times.
I'm glad you weren't laughing at me too. Yeah, that is amazing how few people think about that. They'll put all sorts of features on something and make it not keyboard accessible. And that's just a terrible idea. So it's not just about turning off the focus outline, it's about making sure people can still tab through the page. Fourth rule, do not use role equals presentation or aria hidden equals true on any focusable element. If you do that, some users won't be able to use it. It just will not get the focus at all. And the fifth rule, all interactive elements must have an accessible name. Typically this will come from text on a button or a label or invisible text like alt text on an image. But there are cases where you need to get the accessible name in there using ARIA techniques. I'm not going to dive into those now. There's a pretty long laundry list of how that works. But if you're following best practices with labels and alt text, etc., you're already ahead of the game. So I had mentioned don't take an H1 and try and make it do a thing, and don't try to repurpose an element to be clickable because it won't have focus order. So I have a div that I put an onClick on. And I thought, oh, well, this is a problem because not everybody can use it. So I'm going to put a tab index of 0 on it. So now it's in the focus order. Well, that's still not doing what I want. So now I have to put an onKeyPress on it. And I'm even excluding all the key codes that I'm supposed to be capturing. And well, that's still not doing what I want. So now I have to put a roll button on it. So I've got a div with an onClick, with a tab index, with an onKeyPress, and a roll button, when really all I needed to do was use a button element. The native element, it already does its job. Don't let people trick you with the cool div stuff. Now, to be fair, there's some trickeryness. I have a couple links, Accessibility Lipstick on a Usability Pig that Jared Smith wrote, and also What is Why ARIA, What Does It Do for Me and What Not by Marco Zehe. And those two articles have a lot of cautionary things to keep in mind before you think that ARIA is going to patch everything, because I've had conversations with library developers who say, oh, no, don't worry, ARIA will take care of this. We'll just put some ARIA in there. They don't know what the hell it means. They just think it's a magic bullet. Gonna fly through some of the HTML5 elements. There's sectioning elements. They have accessibility built in. Header, nav, the main element, use only one per page. I want to be clear, use only one main per page. The aside, footer, and form. Those already have accessibility built in. They map to existing ARIA landmark rules. So header maps to roll banner if you're using just the one per page. The nav maps to roll navigation. The main maps to roll main. Aside maps to roll complementary. Footer for your single use on the page maps to roll content info. And if you have a search form, roll search within a form maps it as well. So you don't have to use these roles because they're already built into some of these elements. I have an example of a generic desktop layout. I just show how these roles and elements might map to a page. And then I've got a similar version of the mobile version of the layout. As long as we all recognize that what I'm showing here is the accepted concept of mobile just means narrow screen. Responsive. HTML5 headings. Use normal heading ranks to convey the structure. Don't skip them. Don't put 15 H1s on a page. Don't go from H1 to H5 and then back up to H2. Go in an order that makes sense. Think of it like a bullet list almost. If you read anything that talks about how you should be using H1s for the document outline, ignore it. It's wrong. No browser supports the document outline. It's a myth. Period. It's that simple. Oh, look, I even have a slide dedicated to that. The spec has been updated to warn you also that the document outline is not implemented, so you don't need to worry about it. There is no SEO benefit, so don't get caught up in that either. The new divitis is basically sectionaria. Kind of fun to say that. Or article abuse, not as fun to say, sounds a little troubling. They map to roles on the page. You don't want to mess up those region role mappings. And they can overwhelm users of assistive technology. My rule of thumb is if a section of the page does not get a heading in H1 through 6, then don't use it. Don't make it a section. Don't make it an article. If it shouldn't be in the document outline, then don't use one of those roles. I have this hilarious slide about focus styles, which is an animated GIF of me tabbing through the Virgin America homepage. And I just keep tabbing and tabbing and tabbing, and nothing ever happens. And I opened it up with them over a year ago, and they've done nothing about it. Oh, wait, it scrolled. That means I must have hit something that was below the fold. I mean, it's a terrible experience. Don't do that. You need to keep those focus styles in place. Use those in conjunction, use the focus in conjunction with hover. Don't get rid of outline none unless you have something that is a good replacement for it. I even have this one weird trick to make your sites keyboard friendly. Go find that library that has the focus outline none and delete that line. You'd be amazing how many sites work again if you remove just that one style declaration. It's a little bit painful. Oh wow, I'm really at the end. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, you got about like 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm gonna come in early.
Well,
We have Q&A.
questions?
Okay, I'm gonna really slow it down. This is my last proper slide. Alternative text. Use it. That didn't go as long as I hoped. I'm also a fan of long desk. It doesn't mean you have to use the long desk attribute, or whatever your personal preference is. It's a lifestyle choice. But make that alternative text available, and if you are going to provide a longer description, whether you use long desk or some other technique of doing it, based on the WebAIM screen reader survey results, the data suggests that people want it to be on the same page. So if you are going to include a URL, don't kick them over to another page. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because I have to load 500 beacons just to view a web page now, and it's 30 meg of stuff to download. Yeah, don't make me go away, download all that, and then come back to the main page. Pretty straightforward. So I have the last few slides are just links of resources, so that when I post these, you will be able to grab these at your leisure. I have links to information about meeting the needs of aging web users. I have the easy checks from the W3C, which is that first review of accessibility, overview of how people with disabilities use the web. I have a bunch of links to ARIA stuff. I have lots of other things in here. Oh, I didn't put accessibility wins in there. Oh, mercy, something's gonna kick me. But I have info on the user stories I mentioned, etc. are all in there. And then at the very end, I have the hashtag again with the link to the slides from this talk. They're not live yet, but they will be, and I'm gonna just say it aloud because it's hilarious to pronounce this. Rosel.li, yeah, I'll spell that. ROSEL.li/A11YNYC. So as soon as I get on Wi-Fi, I will be posting those slides, so give me until Thursday. But I'll get those up sometime today. How am I doing on time? Am I done? Do you have, let him ask a question?
Yeah, let's do a couple questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who has questions? A little session of Stump the Chump. Yes?
Why are inline styles considered harmful?
It's not so much that inline styles are considered harmful. The reference I was making before about testing by turning off your CSS, if you see inline styles, that's suggesting that there might be something wrong with your development process, that you're hard coding styles in place. It also means if those styles aren't coded well, it's going to be harder to go and override those down the road. Then you'll have a style sheet with a ton of importance, and it's too easy to lose track of that stuff. Other questions? Yes?
You mentioned about landmarks and roles. Which landmarks are still not accepted or recognized by all screen readers? I understand there are one or two that we, for a while, still need to put role into.
Yeah, I wish I could answer that question, but A, I'm a fraud, because I don't use screen readers on a day-to-day basis, and B, I don't use screen readers on a day-to-day basis, so I just don't know. But I can tell you, if you go to the Slack or Gitter accessibility chats, or you ask with the A11Y hashtag, you're going to get an answer. And you might find there's some variance in answer just because when you're talking about different OSs and different screen readers. And I know with Windows 10 and Edge that there's a lot of discontinuity in their accessibility support right now. So when you pair that up with certain AT, it's not going to map as it would if you're using Internet Explorer.
Okay, do one more question?
Sure. One more question. A lot of pressure. Okay, apparently too much pressure. Anyone? Okay. Oh, wait, oh, in the back.
I would just, do you have a good rule of thumb in terms of when to use the alt tag for text? Because you were talking about visual flourishes versus.
Right.
I mean, sometimes people are trying more and more to do logos that have a sort of semantic. I'm just wondering if you have a suggestion.
You know, I have a suggestion for the way that I build things. If the image itself doesn't add value to what I'm writing, I just leave it out. If the image is a visual pun, I'll include it maybe. But personal preferences can be kind of tricky because I don't want to be verbose. I don't want to waste time. At the same time, the W3C has this really nice, and I deleted the slide. There's this really nice not checklist. It's this logical workflow. You can find it on their site and in other places, and I'll see if I can find it and link to it. But they have this whole logical decision tree about when it's appropriate to include alt text and what might be appropriate alt text. You read it once or twice, and you're going to find that when you think about it, it's probably the way you already do it anyway. It's pretty straightforward, it makes sense, and ultimately you don't want to be verbose, but you don't want to exclude valuable content from the readers. It's not a very good answer, but that's my answer.
Yeah, if you want to have a debate about it, just go into the Slack. You can debate that and knows it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's right. Absolutely.
We do.
You want? We could fight about it now.
Yeah, we can.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, I'm intervening.
Oh.
All right, well, thank you so much, Adrian.
Yeah, no problem.
That's great.